what's up YouTube? Today we're going to look at an interesting monster truck, and this is the FLYNG POINT ZIRCON. It's an 8-scale Nitro 4-wheel drive, 2-speed with reverse. Now you might look at it and think, oh, I've seen something like that before. Yeah, it looks a bit like a HPI SaVaGe, but I'm going to make a bold claim. This is an evolution of the HPI SaVaGe, and there's a few good reasons for that, where they've picked up on from a design and build aspect and taken it to what the SaVaGe could be. So let's have a look. First, let's get a wheelbase. We've got a 350 wheelbase. Let's get a track width. I'm just doing this outer hex to hex because you can fit different offset wheels and widen that, and that's on a 360 track, which is also adjustable as well. And the overall length bumper end to bumper end is 45.5 centimeters. And then let's get a weight. I know this hasn't got the wheels and the body shell. You'll have to just take that into account. Some other radio bits missing, but it'll give you an idea. And that's at a pretty hefty 2968 grams. So near enough 3 kilograms for what's just sitting there. Once you add those extra bits on, you're probably looking at well over 5 kilos. Not well over, maybe coming in at about 5 kilos with the other bits, wheels, depending on what wheels, body shell, radio equipment, a fuel tank, exhaust. A few bits missing on this one. I know it's not the best example to show, but hopefully it will still bring value, this video. I've never managed to get a complete one of these, so if you got one, be proud of it. Alright, that was the weight. So let's look at first few things on it. So we've got this twin vertical plate chassis arrangement, which is, instead of a flat chassis, they're vertical chassis, and it's twin. It's 2 chassis. Twin vertical plate, which is an extremely rigid method. So there will be pretty much never a flex of it bending that way, which you can easily bend most single flat chassis by hand, and often they tune the flex in it because it gives you an element of suspension harmonic, which can be desirable in some RC vehicles, namely buggies. But the twin vertical plate is near zero flex because you've got the full sectional height of the chassis counteracting the up and down loads. There's gearbox falling out there. Right, next is the thickness of the chassis. These are thicker than a standard chassis, SaVaGe chassis, and they come in at 3.5 millimeters. So that's a very sturdy bit of aluminium, and you can see it's heat treated and anodized, so it's a nice stiff piece there. So, and also the chassis is narrower than the SaVaGe chassis, which is a bit wider, and that gives it another form of strength because there's less moment to work against it. Each part of the vertical chassis being closer together, it's a bit stronger that way. We've also got, while we're on the chassis, let's look at the gearbox, because let's get this engine out of the way. It's a bit more of a compact design than the SaVaGe. I'll give you that measurement actually for those SaVaGe owners. the width between them centre to centre is just 50mm. So you've got a nice compact gearbox which does have all steel internals and quite a heavy duty input shaft there and output shafts. And this gearbox is already 2-speed, just like the SaVaGE, but has an incorporated reverse. So can you see the lower output shafts turning that way? And then you can put it the other way and they'll turn the other way. So there's a servo can articulate that. Reverse was optional on the SaVaGE. They've made it a standard on the Zircon. And you've got a similar disc brake arrangement down there on this lever, with a few quite heavy duty pads there. Right, next bit to look at is, let's look at the suspension on the front, the actual shocks themselves. So one of the weaknesses of the SaVaGE, although one of its sort of most appealing design features, was that 8 shock absorbers, big long travel, but those skinny shafts and plastic bodies, if you've ever had a SaVaGE, they were always popping off and getting bent and generally causing mayhem. And here they've gone for a much shorter design, from generally the size of a 1/8 scale buggy or truggy. And let's take that eye to eye measurement here. Is 110mm. If you look in there, you've got a much thicker shaft. You've got a, let's see if I can get it, a 3.5mm shaft there, which is thicker than the SaVaGE shaft, and a full aluminium body for it. So there's a lot more strength and it's a lot more robust. Not to mention you've got all the 1/8 scale tuning options from standard buggies for the springs, so you can tune that in, but those are significantly more robust, and that's the next stage of why I call it an evolution on the SaVaGE design. Then let's have a look at your hub area. They've gone for the very robust pivot ball concept, so that's 2 big balls in the top and bottom, so that allows your movement up and down and your steering. It's a very strong way of doing it, because rather than your pivots being concentrated on a thin-ish pin or screw, the loads are spread across quite a large ball. Those, roughly are about 1 centimetre. You've got the funny flying point universal joints. I've seen these across their other buggies and shafts, so they look fairly sturdy, but that allows a bit of a weak point, having the grub screw and it not just being one piece as they often are. But that's them. And then you've got a very thick axle that takes a big nut, so you've got an 8mm threaded portion of the axle, and so that's taking a huge wheel nut, which is a 13mm nut, and then your hex is quite a large 19mm hex. So that's a bit of an odd size, but again a fairly hefty evolution on the SaVaGE, which was always stripping its original 14mm hexes, and even the 17s were prone to strip at points. But here you've got large surface areas on a 19mm hex and a big thick axle, and also importantly this collar part supports the wheel substantially as well, so having it, the bit that goes through the wheel, seated well on this wide collar also provides a lot of strength and support to the hex area. So that's a big evolutions there in the design concept. The turnbuckles themselves as well have gone up to 4mm, so that's a bit stronger, well, quite a lot stronger, although they've somewhat undermined this with this strange arrangement there. You know that focus? Yep. Here. With that pin going through it, because that's gone down to a 3mm pin and an M3 screw, so you might have a big strong turnbuckle, but I'm sure it's just going to, when you have a big impact, it's just going to break or pivot there. That's how your steering works. Double bell cranks, externally mounted to the chassis, unlike the SaVaGe. And they look very similar to the SaVaGe items in terms of size and duty, although we also get here a thick alloy steering plate, which is thicker than the SaVaGe item. Another area of substantial improvement, although not a bad part on the SaVaGe, but we've got a lower profile and quite hefty body post mounting system, which mounts on top of the alloy shock tower here. 3 large screws, so this all looks fairly heavy duty, but there was never problems on the SaVaGe in these areas, which were extremely overbuilt and well designed by HPI. We've gone for a more conventional basic type of bumper rather than the SaVaGe's very good system, which could absorb a lot of impact, the SaVaGe bumper, with the designed flex in those plastic pieces. But this is a bit lower profile. And then the diffs themselves inside there, we're not going to open them up, but they are all metal items with a much larger tooth pattern, as you would have found on all 1/8 scales, but was a major failing on the SaVaGe to have that small tooth design and plastic housings in the diff. They revised it in later SaVaGes for what are called the heavy duty diffs, but definitely these are, I mean, maybe you can hear the teeth engaging and get a gauge of the metal duty of that, the size of the metal and the duty it is. So the fuel, well, this mounts upside down, or maybe it's the right way around, but the fuel tank was a long item that sits here outside, so that was similar to the SaVaGe, but it's a rectangle and lower profile closer to the chassis, and the chassis is thinner. So whereas the SaVaGe one was always out here and would always take a hit and become cracked through various impacts, I think namely this flex in the back suspension, this lower profile one was a way of sort of reducing that problem, and it was made of a thicker plastic as well. It's a shame I don't have one to show you, but you would get an idea that is they made an upgrade there. The exhaust went on this side, outside, just like the SaVaGe, and these are the engine mounts, which you don't have that plate which mounted the engine on the SaVaGe, which added a lot of strength, but in this way it sort of makes the engine case itself almost a structural member, because the mounts mounted to the engine to the chassis means that the engine crankcase itself is the brace across the chassis. So nice bit of engineering concept there. I'm not sure if that meant that you lost an engine in a really big impact, but you know, type of racing design concept there to use an engine as a stress member. The mounts allow nearly all the general big block fitments, so changing engines in these was quite easy, and upgrading them, etc. Again, I'm sorry it's not complete to give you to show you exactly how it was. One day hopefully I'll find one and maybe I can add into the video. Next point is the general hardware on it. Let's look at this rear hub arrangement. Sorry, Adjusting those screws allows you to bring the rear track width out, and then they've also opted for a system on the back which was addressed by the aftermarket for the SaVaGe. So instead of having the same steering pivot as the front but with a locked turnbuckle that the SaVaGe has, again, which would often pop off, especially if you landed on the back wheels hard, they've made that what is I've seen termed as a true track system, but really is just a conventional rear suspension, but essentially not having that turnbuckle to support it, which does make it a bit stronger, and was a good upgrade for the SaVaGe actually. If you've run a SaVaGe, getting the alloy true track rear, which meant it just held it locked through its design rather than through that turnbuckle, definitely eliminated one of the failure modes of the SaVaGe. So that's in place there, and you can see how overbuilt this structure is, how sturdy it is. Incidentally though, I think they are on a 4mm pin and 3mm top pin, 3mm hardware there, so that's a bit comparable. You do have some use of hex Allen head bolts or cap head bolts, so I would say the hardware was sort of comparable to the HPI. It's not a major upgrade there, but the SaVaGe did have good hardware as it was up to the duty. Another feature is this low mounted servo, which has quite a good and not only does it keep the servo in a lower centre of gravity position, but it also has a good arc for turning the wheels. Although you've got to say, this particular linkage looks a bit weedy, doesn't it, to hold a big monster truck flying forward on its second gear to steer it. So that's it. The FLYNG POINT ZIRCON. I'm calling it the HPI SaVaGe EVOLUTION. Let me know what you guys think, especially those who love the SaVaGe. I love the SaVaGe. I'd like to get this running and run them side by side and see how it really goes down. But after I ran a SaVaGe extensively through many bash sessions, I can say I would have been grateful for some of these features. Thicker chassis, shorter alloy bodied shocks, the integrated reverse, the narrower, stronger TVPs. I failed all of those pieces on a SaVaGe through just general abuse, and in my final ultimate SaVaGe build I upgraded all of those items, whereas this was a truck made by FLYNG POINT which came already at that level. And not to mention the diffs. I messed around a lot with SaVaGe diffs, so coming with big strong diffs is a must. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you had one of these, please share your experiences. I never managed to run one. If you had one and your mate had a SaVaGe, how did it play out? Thanks for watching.